It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Hey, Al, we're going to go with you first.
Okay.
It's now a matter of fact that former President Trump has now been found guilty of sexual assault. I mean, how can you run for president and be accused of sexual assault? Not accused, but found guilty of sexual assault.
Well, you have to run as a Republican in the Trump Republican Party. It's that simple. This conviction or his being found guilty, it's not a criminal conviction, it's a civil conviction, will make a difference, as will his performance last night in the CNN town meeting. I mean, to me, both are going to make it more and more likely that he cannot win the presidency again. I never thought he could, and now I'm almost certain he can. CNN had this crazy audience of Trumpies last night that cheered him at every gross thing he said. And, maybe that's an indication that being a sociopath and a pathological liar is an asset in the Republican primaries, but it sure isn't in the general election. The American people just don't want that kind of president. When you see something like last night, and you see the way Trump reacted to the jury's decision in New York, you can sort of lose context because it's so unreal. It's so surreal. But let's put it in perspective. I mean, this is a person who has twice lost the popular vote for president by, winning in the Electoral College by rather unusual circumstances, in a sense. He got the presidency, but he's lost the popular vote twice, last time by over 7 million votes. He lost his party control of the House in 2018 and almost cost him the chance to regain it in 2022. He lost his party control of the Senate in 2021, and in a year that they should have won it back in 2022 because he supported crazy Trump candidates. They didn't win it back. And to win a general election, he's got to improve his standing among independents. He's got to win in the suburbs. He's got to do better among college graduates. I dare say that there are very few people in those categories who are going to be convinced to vote for him because he now has been convicted of sexual assault and because he gave us an hour and 10 minutes of pathological lying and sociopathic behavior last night. I mean, it just doesn't seem to make any sense. But Trump is an interesting candidate. He does better when he keeps quiet, when he's out of the spotlight. His polls go up a little bit. There are a lot of candidates like that. But his problem is he can't help himself and he can't stay out of the limelight. President Biden is probably a weak candidate. I've said that before. If the 2024 election were just a referendum on him, he'd probably be in deep trouble. But Trump has a way of making every election he's in a referendum on him, and he just can't win those. The most telling number in recent polling is the Wall Street Journal poll that said among voters who don't like both Trump and Biden, Biden wins 54-15. Those are the voters who will decide a general election and make sure Trump won't get elected. Basically, as long as President Biden, or if he's not the Democratic candidate, another Democrat consolidates the anti-Trump vote, if Trump is the candidate, the Democrats are going to win. And I just want to make one other comment, and that's why this effort that No Labels is doing is so dangerous for the country. No Labels, which is supposed to be a bipartisan group, is thinking about trying to get a third candidate in the race in some key states. And that would be a disaster, because if you give anti-Trump voters a way to split their vote, that is the only way that Trump, with a plurality of vote, he's a high floor, low ceiling candidate, could win. But just to sum up, this week's events may make the Trump campaign think they've improved their stock in the primaries, and maybe they have. But if they want to win the White House, this week has been a disaster for them.
Craig, you've become an expert in town meetings over the last couple of months with your volunteer efforts with Talbot County. What did you think about last night? Was it surreal for you as well?
I thought that the format of having an audience that was not balanced, I'm sure that was negotiated by the Trump people to do it, lent a lack of authenticity to the whole affair with the cheering that was going on. I do think that CNN's Caitlin Collins stood her ground and gave pretty much as good as she got. She clearly prepared a lot for this. She was not going to take the misstatements and untruths without challenging them. I can't remember any other interaction with a journalist where the journalist concludes each round of discussion with, well, the facts suggest otherwise, let's move on. I mean, basically saying you've lied, not allowed to, let's take on another topic. Extraordinary for anybody, but particularly for a former president of the United States. I agree with what Al said exactly. I had a psychology professor years and years and years ago who said, the difference between the sociopath and psychopath is that sociopath builds castles in the air. The psychopath moves in. And Donald Trump has created a reality for himself that's just, otherworldly. I mean, he really won the election because he got more votes than he did the first time around. Well, yes, but fewer votes than the person he was running against. The election was stolen, and yet in court case after court case, it was shown not to be true. And I thought in the discussion, while Caitlin Collins worked hard to get at that, Trump is unmoved. I mean, I probably could pass a lie detector test. I think he totally believes what he's saying as he says it, even though it's as far from the truth as you can get. And in the aftermath, his performance was just, thrashed by one commentator after another. I did see a Republican who said Trump did what he needed to do, which I guess meant didn't physically attack the correspondent. But I can't believe in some ways we're even having to have the discussion again. This is an individual who no public company in the United States would put on their board of directors. I don't think Walmart would hire him as a greeter, if Walmart even has greeters. I mean, he could not get a job in a public company given his record. And now this latest trial finding him to have done harm to an individual is but one of several more to come. So I thought it was a curious thing that he even wanted to have this session. I think it was probably to rally his troops, and he put some of them in the room to get the applause. And I'm sure people today are saying that he was treated unfairly, his supporters. But honestly, he had every chance to explain himself on issues that are on people's mind, and he every single time chose to go in the direction of falsehood and self-aggrandizement. And so I think I think these actions should disqualify him as a candidate, frankly, in my party, the Republican Party. They certainly will lead to a defeat at the polls in a general election. And in my mind, I just don't think he's electable. So why we continue to have people following him is puzzling to me. But I do think, to answer what question you ask of Al, I do think it takes a toll. I do think this is the climbing the proverbial hill, and it's getting steeper and steeper. And at some point, you just can't sustain all of these issues. I don't believe. I mean, nothing in history would suggest you can, although Trump sometimes defies the laws of gravity. But I just don't see this working for him down the road.
You know, Al, the town hall meeting actually is now kind of eclipsed the actual guilty verdict that Trump got yesterday. It's pushing Republicans hard for them to react, and it's now not just the court case, but it's again this serial denial of the election. I mean, don't you feel like this is going to come quickly to an end?
I don't think Trump is prone to bow out of the campaign, so he will prolong the agony. There are a couple of things that really struck me, though. He wants to make the mental competency issue against Biden. That man was a raging lunatic. Anybody who saw him says this guy is mentally ill. He probably should be committed. It's not like he looks like he's like he's 45. He looks like he's an old man, and he's an angry old man, and he's raging all the time, and he's a bully, and he doesn't understand decent behavior. I mean, you can make your points without behaving the way he did last night, Caitlin Collins. But the other thing that is really striking is the way, for the most part, on the conviction on sexual assault, and I haven't seen a lot out of last night, but I'm sure it's going to be the same. The Republican candidates who are running against him are trying to stick their head in the sand. I find that just stunning. I mean, other than Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie, who I gather is probably even less popular than Trump, I'm sure he is in the Republican Party. But other than those two, the Republican candidates basically say, oh, well, the little boy took 2 marbles, and so let's not worry about him. He's not very harmful. I mean, this is just outrageous. Yeah. I mean, think about what a Republican candidate is up against in 2024 and what he or she would need to do to win. You already have issues like Roe versus Wade, where he was unbelievable last night because he won't, he wants to take credit for it without being for it, or whatever. Now it would take somebody who, I mean, it was almost impossible to understand what he was talking about on that. But we've seen in the 2022 elections how that plays in a lot of swing states. The Republicans have a terrible deficit with women, and the way Trump behaves, it stretches that deficit to conservative women who disagree with the Democrats on the issue, but think that a president ought to be decent and have some regard for women. Mm-hmm. it's hard for anybody who, and again, you have to win in the suburbs. You have to win college graduates, or at least cut your losses among them. And I don't know. I mean, I guess Trump is somebody who can only see a very small, and also you want to be on America's side. You don't want to be on Putin's side. You know, I guess I don't understand what the people around Trump are telling him about a general election. But my guess is he doesn't really think about a general election. He thinks about winning today. He wants to win today's headlines. He wants to get, and so if he'll get the nomination, and then he'll worry about that. But sometimes you dig such a deep hole that, when you're 30 feet underground, if you climb back in the general to 25 underground, you're still going to get clobbered.
Craig, you have the last word this week.
Well, I've been trying to think of a ray of light here, this discussion, and I kind of flash back to 1987 and then early 1988. So Vice President George Bush is seeking the nomination of his party to serve as president. And in 1987, in fact, did not go back to 1986 and the congressional races, we were all over the country. We were building up credits with candidates all over the country. We traveled all over, and again in 1987, laying the groundwork for the 1988 campaign. And we went into Iowa, the Iowa caucuses, and George Bush lost to Pat Robertson, who came in first. Bob Dole came in second, and George Bush came in third. And, nobody could match us for the time we spent in Iowa. And suddenly, Pat Robertson's strength as a candidate looked, just remarkable. Now, we went in and won in New Hampshire, and Bush continued to win primary contests and got the nomination. My point is, it's kind of like, hey, let's have this discussion in early 2024 and just see how the sorting out process goes. And I think the voters today are as turned off and as tuned out to politics as they've been in a long time. I think they're fed up with Congress. They worry about real issues like the consequences of not raising the debt ceiling. And if they're not worried about it and the Congress fails to raise it, they're going to really be upset with the consequences. And so all of this kind of gets lost in the noise. And then there's this preposterous town hall with statements by Trump that, while outrageous, I totally agree with Al, they're consistent with what he's been saying for a long time. I just think they tune it out. And I think when we kind of refocus, when people begin to focus with debates, to be sure, debates in later this year and all that, but when they really begin to focus and have to go cast votes, I'm hoping the American voter is a little bit more serious and makes a choice that reflects, the direction they want the country to go in. And I just don't think Donald Trump represents that for very many people, even for all that many Republicans. But, time will tell. I just will say that a lot can change between now and when you start actually taking people to the polls in the primaries of 2024.
We have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We'll see you next week.